Morning all. Let's have a look at some other excellent games from the Sinquefield Cup, not yet covered. One of those was Magnus Carlsen playing against Hikaru Nakamura in round 7. Magnus kicked off with d4. They have very fierce and kind of funny rivalry using the latest social media like Twitter, these two, which I think will be increasingly common for the newer generation of grandmasters. So this social media kind of hypes up any encounters. What would Nakamura play here? Well, he plays solidly actually with d5 and after c4 c6. So Nakamura is playing the Slav defense. After knight c3, he actually takes on c4 here. Let's have a quick look on my live book. There's in this position knight f6 is the most popular, followed by e6. D takes is third most popular. Now Magnus played e3. Another move is e4 there. b5 holding the pawn. So it looks like a very materialistic start to the game. I remember actually playing against my Atari ST on chess. I think it used to take this pawn and try and hold on to it. I used to try and get dynamic compensation. Here, White has a bit more time for undermining this structure because the bishop hasn't been developed. It's been immediately after this pawn, and mining operations on the structure continue now with a4. So it's all about quick undermining. Black hasn't got much chance for a6 here. We could just use the pin. A takes, and knight takes b5 using that pin. So, okay, Nakamura plays b4. This is virtually the only move played in the position. Now, knight e4 is played. Knight a2 is also another alternative there, but knight e4. So the damage has been done. The pawn has been lured forwards, weakening c4 here. A sharp line. Nakamura has played this recently in the Olympiad against Medvedev, who actually won that game, that particular game. Queen d5, knight d2, c3. Now in the Medvedev game, I think the knight moved. Actually, Medvedev moved the knight. Here, this is another alternative, but the main move, b takes, is actually played most often, taking. And now a backward but strong retreat move, knight b1. Okay, so basically the structure doesn't seem at all solid. Black's pawn structure here doesn't seem that healthy. If White can win this pawn, then these pawns are also kind of isolated. So a sharp, very, very sharp opening decision from Nakamura. Queen a5, queen c2, and now apparently in this position the main move is knight a6. Here, knight a6. So it's got ideas of quick knight b4. So in this position, after knight a6, White might take, for example, and here taking this is okay. I think just about for Black, although White seems to enjoy a pleasant small advantage. So anyway, after this queen c2, a different move was chosen, not knight a6, e5. And now, instead of taking here, I think taking here would not be brilliant. Knight d7, and Black is getting a lot of active piece play, generally speaking. So actually, knight f3 was played. And in this position, knight a6 was played here. This isn't particularly good here, actually. It seems, technically at least, it's not particularly good at all. I mean, it's offering a gambit, basically, taking this pawn for this knight b4. But is knight b4 so terrifying in this position to offer the centre pawn? Let's have a look at this position. With knight f3, perhaps Black should just take on d4. So knight takes d4. And just carry on normally, maybe. There's various moves. Bishop b4, knight f6. Knight a6 here. There's knight takes c6, so that's not particularly good for black at all. For example, if queen here in this position, white can even just play knight takes because of this bishop b5 resource. So it takes bishop b5. But yeah, black doesn't have to play knight a6 to give up the c6 pawn if black just plays knight f6. This isn't apparently too terrible, but it's not great for black. He didn't really want this unhealthy pawn structure, surely, without too much piece play. So after knight f3, yes, knight a6 being played here, Magnus actually did take on e5, and is basically asking Nakamura to show the compensation for that centre pawn. And a centre pawn is, you know, if you can get away with it, then you're controlling the centre more. You just won a centre pawn. It's of huge significance, the battle of central control. Where is the compensation? Well, black has to go in for this knight b4 surely, because he's threatening, well, white's threatening c6 now, as usual. You know, knight f6. We can just take on c6 again. We've always got this bishop b5 resource. So knight b4 was played, hitting the queen. Okay, the first thing here to examine is queen c3. If queen takes c3, this wasn't played, then black justifies his piece play with knight c2 check, using the pin. And if king d2, then not taking, well, the queen's hanging, bishop b4. Ouch. And on king d1, then taking on c3, then taking on a1, and that's good for black. Okay, so yeah, the pawn's not to be taken here, and it seems a little bit tricky actually, because if queen d1, then c2, ouch, winning material, we can just take here. Okay, so where else? It seems okay, let's have a look at queen e4, then just knight f6, hitting the queen, and then after bishop d6, fantastic for black, fantastic piece play. Say knight takes c6 here, knight c2 check. Yeah, so there's not too many moves for the queen. Just to demonstrate, after this, queen e2 is also answerable here with c2. It's not as disastrous as the other moves so far. c2 or bishop f5, and this is looking as though black's got great compensation. After knight c4, maybe black can just go back here, and this horrible threat here has to be dealt with. But black has compensation here. If white has to play e4, then d4 is weakened. If it plays out like this, then this is showing good compensation for black. Knight c2 springs up there again. So Magnus plays basically the only move on the board here which is any good, and unfortunately it's good enough. It's queen b3, and it actually threatens queen takes f7. Pretty crude from the opening, but it's the only move really. Bishop e6. Now bishop c4 is played, and it still seems as though c2 is a dangerous resource here in principle. It's actually played here, and it looks as though, you know, this discovered check, double check, going to be useful. A very sharp opening, it has to be said. Bishop takes e6. Now here, if f takes, then Magnus just doesn't worry about the knight. He just takes here, and then plays knight c3, and this should be okay. Knight d3 is covered here. There's nothing here for black, it seems, going on of great interest. So after bishop takes e6, knight d3 check, double check was played here. But this, after king e2, protecting the bishop now, knight takes e5, d takes e5, Okay, now here, if takes, then we can take on f7. That can't be that good. We take on f7 first. Big advantage to white. So, f takes e6 was played. Queen takes e6, knight e7. And white has emerged with a material advantage here after knight d2. Let's count the pawns. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Black has a pawn deficit. 3, 4, 5. White also has this big centre pawn on e5. And okay, is the king unsafe here? What if black didn't play this, but what if queen a6? Well, actually queen c4. That's not good. This pawn also looks vulnerable there, and it's a vulnerable pawn behind it. These pawns are just diced here. And how does black actually develop anything or improve the position? If g6, for example, then actually white can strike with knight e4, with knight f6 now, and knight d6. This is horrible. You know, bishop g7, knight d6 check. Knight b7 check. Things get grim. Winning the queen. So basically, yeah, very unpleasant to try and develop the pieces. So Nakamura volunteers exchange of queens. It's a bad position, a pawn down from the opening at move 20. So something's gone badly wrong in the opening. To have this position, queen takes, knight e4 is played, and white would like to connect the rooks and start attacking the pawn, for example, like that, or just bishop d2 and then start attacking the pawn soon. Rook b8 stops bishop b2, so the bishop goes here. So white is just going to attack this pawn now. The dicing of pawns is something for white to cherish here. Bishop b4, and now rook hc1. So is black going to be 2 pawns down? Bishop takes d2, knight takes d2, now knight b4. Okay, clinging on for the moment. Knight f3, showing the idea that either knight d4 or knight e1 is on the cards to win this c2 pawn. So not only black is a pawn down, he's about to be 2 pawns down, it seems. King e7, knight e1. Now here, rook hd8 was played, which does give black support for that d3 square. So if the pawn is taken immediately, and sometimes this is often a bad idea to take things immediately, because there's compensation sometimes, which in this position there's some compensation with knight d3 to hit the rook to hit e5. That doesn't have to be given actually. White can more carefully win this pawn with f4 first. So it doesn't want to lose e5. It's a great pass pawn. There's nothing stopping that pawn. These pawns can just be an avalanche later. So black is waiting now to lose another pawn. After c5, yep, 2 pawns down. Knight d3, rook cb1. Knight b2 is played. Not much is going on for black. Doesn't seem that much going on. But Magnus plays this move, which kind of allows a tactical idea. Rook a2. It leaves b1 loose. And now Nakamura plays a tactical move. Knight takes a4. Okay, knight takes a4 has this idea of knight c3 check, and the rook is attacking this one. But it doesn't matter. After rook takes b8, knight c3 check is invited. King f3. And now knight takes a2 is played. White is better here. White is still a solid pawn up, and these pawns are about to avalanche soon as well. If black had played rook takes b8, then rook takes a7 check is even worse, with that rook on the 7th. and also going to start mowing this pawn. There's no real danger here. So knight takes a2. The problem is now rook b5, and we're back to trying to win pawns and stuff. So these ideas of trying to win pawns. Knight b4 is played. Let's see if knight c3. I don't think this helps Nakamura at all. Rook takes. Unfortunately, yes, the damage from the opening is severe here, and we have this basically lost endgame position. Now 2 pawns down, and let's see the technique. Rook a8, the king comes up, the rook blocks black's passed pawn, and now these pawns can freely avalanche on the king's side. So h4, pushing them all up, lots and lots of passed connected pawns. After king f6, the temporary blockade of these pawns is removed now with this idea to mate the black king. The king comes out of that check and goes there. e7 check, very forcing continuation to transition into a winning king and pawn ending. After rook d8 check, the king's in the square of the pawn, can get that pawn. So after taking king d5, it's in the square. So here there's no point trying for that, that's not going to happen. So we've just got these passed pawns. It's trivially winning, actually, it seems. g5, king c4. So white has got a protected passed pawn here now, coming up after king e5. The pawns hold each other after king b4. Black dare not take now because of f6, queening. So Nakamura resigned here. It was an unfortunate game. When I think of one-day chess, the importance of the openings, so you don't have to suffer the entire day, is emphasized. And I think Nakamura said once in an interview recently that actually one of the main distinguishing things about long serious chess compared to say blitz chess is the importance of getting a good position from the opening, good preparation. It just seems here there's some major slip up in preparation here. Maybe he was thinking about the knight f3 lines from the Mamdorov game, having something there. But taking here, it seems after knight b1. According to live book coming up here, after queen c2, it seems knight a6 is mandatory in this position, without any e5. It's just very critical to get a reasonable position, especially against someone like Magnus Carlsen. But even generally, anyone in a long game, a one-day game, a slip up from the opening can be very costly, and I think this demonstrates that. Although it did seem initially that it's quite a terrifying sequence for white to have. Sorry, in this position, for white after e5 to have to play very precisely with his queen to volunteer this position here after queen b3 and to allow this double check. But yeah, it's what happens after. It's not such a big deal to play king e2. In fact, there's an amusing one. King f1 is queen e1 checkmate. There's an amusing side note there. But yeah, king e2, it's like white had an advantage basically throughout the game, straight from the opening to that end game. Okay, so a bad opening from Nakamura there. Comments or questions on YouTube? Thanks very much.